אני מתכבדת להזמין לבמה את משתתפי פאנל מולטיפלייר בהנחיית עידו ברוש, נשיא GameIS. אל עידו תצטרף אלין יוג'ונג מון, סגנית נשיא פדרציית הספורט האלקטרוני האירופית. יחד הם ידברו על הדרך שבה הספורט האלקטרוני מסייע בבניית קהילות, בשימור שחקנים ובהפיכת משחקי מולטיפלייר לאקוסיסטם תחרותי מצליח. I am honored to invite the Multiplier panel, moderated by Ido Brosh, President of GameIS, to the stage. Joining him is Elin Yoojung Moen, Vice President of the European Esports Federation. Together they will discuss how esports helps build communities, improve player retention, and transform multiplayer games into thriving competitive ecosystems.
Okay, hello everyone. I know that I will just say a few words in Hebrew, if that's okay with you, Elin. אני יודע שאנחנו עייפים ואחרי ארוחת צהריים, אבל יש לנו נושא סופר מעניין שלא מדברים עליו מספיק היום בתעשייה שלנו, ואני מקווה ככה להעיר עליו קצת אור, אז תהיו איתנו. Welcome everyone to today's panel, the Multiplier, and we will discuss how esports can help with retention numbers in multiplayer games. We are currently sitting in a fascinating area in the game industry. The acquisition phase, where growth was simply about getting new players through the door, is largely over. User acquisition costs have skyrocketed and player attention is hyper-fragmented. We are now firmly in the efficiency phase, where retaining a player is 5 times more cost-effective than acquiring a new player. Yet we look at titles like Counter-Strike or League of Legends and Valorant, and we see games that don't just retain players for a few months, but for over a decade. They haven't just built games, they've built ecosystems. Today we're going to dissect the anatomy of these ecosystems. We'll explore the psychological hooks, the specific game design choices required for watchability, which is a term that we will discuss, and how to predict and prevent churn, and the symbiotic economies that keep these wheels turning. To unpack all of this, I'm joined by the incredibly talented Elin Yoojung Moen, Vice President of the European Esports Federation, that came all the way from Norway to join us.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy that you call me like the incredibly talented one. I'm really happy to be here, so thank you so much for like the warm welcome I've had here in Israel and for all the lovely people I have met so far. And I'm truly grateful to be here.
Amazing. First time in Israel, right? First time in Israel.
Yes,
yeah.
My very first time here.
Excellent. So we are very happy to have you here. And the first thing I want to explore is the psychological hook and the watch-play loop. And what that means basically is why players stay in games that activate esports very well, and how viewing games drive playing games. So when a multiplayer game transitions from being just a fun game to play with friends to a fully fledged esports, that means a competitive environment. What is the fundamental psychological shift that happens in the player base?
So from my perspective, this is all about basic brand loyalty. The ability to create a personal emotions and sort of create like an identity and loyalty to the game. And we see the same work in traditional sports with sports clubs and etc. And there has been several successful studies done on this, looking at what kind of like psychological effect you might say it had for the community, the players, towards the games they play.
So we know that games like, League of Legends or Counter-Strike or Fortnite or Rocket League, even, FIFA, FC is very popular in Israel. We often talk about these games having this kind of large-scale international leagues, right, with the pro players participating and everything. And this is where the watch-play loop kind of happens, right? Where watching a pro player on Sunday inspires a casual player to play on Monday. How do you intentionally design or foster that specific retention loop?
I say it has to be community-driven and community-focused. Once again, I'm going to be very honest. I tend to be very honest. Ido knows this already. Whenever you're creating a brand, it doesn't matter if it's like makeup or like the Birkin bags that were talked about earlier. It's about the emotional connection that people feel to whatever brand. And this is where esports, utilizing esports is very strong, because we know that this creates very strong emotions in people. Like you win, you lose, you cheer for your team, etc. So it's focusing on the community and how to engage them. Basically, you actually want the strong emotions around it.
Okay, let's take a moment back and discuss game design. A lot of game makers here. You know, and one of the things that keeps being brought up is that games like Rocket League or League of Legends, they have a lot of game design elements introduced by the developers that are not necessarily conducive or contributing to the gameplay itself, but rather to the spectating features, right? So what kind of features does a game maker need to kind of implement in their games for it to become something that is watchable?
Well, one of the first things, it's thinking actually about the UI, like the layout, so it's easy for spectators to get into the game. I will bring up chess a little bit, because I have a very good example from Norway about this. Chess can be complicated to understand, right? If you never played it yourself, you don't have any experience with it. It's like when Magnus Carlsen was a kid, right before he won his first title, Norway arranged the first chess Olympic Games in Norway. And we invented a way to show how chess works so that the average player at home could watch it on the TV and understand what is going on. So it's also about the layout and information shown on the screen to engage the people at home. Because even for me, if I was a new player watching a new game, like one of the really big competitive games, as you mentioned, I would not understand anything going on. And I'm still having issues, actually, I'm going to be honest, understanding all the time what's happening in Dota 2, because I never played a lot of Dota myself. But it helps, so you need to sort of come with a mindset that what you show on the screen, especially to the audience, because technically, the audience, of course, is already the players, but you also want to reach different demographic groups. You want to bring the people that doesn't play the game into the game. And then you have to actually talk and visualize for those people instead.
Right, that's really a key insight here. But let's take a step back. I want to ask the audience, how many of you play multiplayer games? Oh, that's a lot of people. League of Legends, raise your hands. Counter-Strike? There we go. Valorant? Okay, Fortnite? Rocket League? Oh, that's good. FC? FIFA? Or eFootball or some such? Okay. Tekken? Or Mortal Kombat or those things? One guy. Just the guy. Don't fight him. I'm saying he comes with experience. Okay, so all of you play these multiplayer games, and I think one of the most obvious problems in multiplayer games is the balancing, right? For example, in League of Legends or Dota or Valorant, if there is one hero or champion or character that you can pick, and then you can just steamroll all the other people, then everyone will just pick that character, right? There needs to be a balance between everything, and it's the same in Rocket League, it's the same in other games. So the question is, how do you balance the game for the top 0.1% of players who are extremely good and talented, while not alienating the casual player base, which are the bread and butter of every game?
Let me ask the same question back to you guys and back to you, Ido. Why don't we do that for football? Football can be both done at an elite level and at a grassroots level for kids, right? It's the same rules. League of Legends has the same rules, it's just that the level is different depending how good you are. So from my perspective, and this is let's call it the Nordic model, that it's equally important. And then it's up to like the communities that wants to go hardcore, go all in, etc., to like raise the level there. But from a game developer perspective, it's all about actually, I would say as a federation, I would rather prefer that I have 20,000 single members that pay 100 euros membership fee per year than 10 players that pay 1,000 euros per year. It's a money game, basically. So the cue here is to, I would say, try to reach the masses, think broadly, maybe think in like different demographic groups than what we usually target. And this is a mistake we also have done in Norway. One of our biggest LAN parties, we have seen that what triggers or what activates or what makes the youth, now I'm talking like young Gen Z, Gen Alpha, what makes them interested in a game, a hobby, a tournament, competition, is totally different than what I would like to see. And it's so easy to, from my perspective, to say, oh, but this is what I like, so that's the way we should do it. So yeah, think outside the box.
So that's really a key importance here, because basically the baseline of everything that you're saying is that you need to build a community, right, around that game, around that multiplayer game, and not only build that community, but can kind of democratize it or liberalize it. You just give them more power to organize their own things in their own platforms, and in this way there is this kind of organic, not only growth, but also retention of players through that sense of belonging to the community. But here's the problem. Everyone knows that in the multiplayer ecosystem, the number one silent killer, or maybe not so silent killer, is toxic players and people that bring certain unpleasant behaviors into those communities, into those games, and then make other players maybe feel less welcome. So how do we deal with that?
Unpopular, popular opinion. I think game developers and publishers today are doing actually a really good job at regulating those toxic environments. When it goes into like the more community-based environments, that's up to the community itself to regulate itself. And I think when you see like the extreme cases of very toxic, it means that as a society, the people, normal people, we failed. If we cannot teach our kids to scream slurs at each other in a video game, then we literally failed as a society sort of to uphold a certain standard and just be a polite, humble, good person. And we do see this, and this is some of the work, we work a lot on this in the Nordics, the federations. That's part of one of the reasons we do it, because we have seen like letting the kids run loose on the internet, because to be honest, I'm from that generation. There was a lot of weird stuff happening on the internet in the early days, okay? And this is the purpose of a federation. This is the purpose of any sports federation. It's to create a safe environment where we're bringing kids to youth, and we teach them some discipline. So some like, let's call it like digital hygiene, like how to be a digital citizen, basically. Because we also did this like exercise test with kids. They're very good at throwing insults at each other online, but if you put them face to face in front of each other, they're not going to say these things to each other's faces, right? So that's one of, I think, so yeah. And conclusion is that the toxicity we see is more based, like the responsibility lies in society, I would say, as a whole, and the communities to uphold a certain standards. And what we see from the game developers so far has been very good. And to be honest, now we're talking about the big ones again. Like, I don't think they can do much more before like shutting down the game.
Well, that is the nuclear option. But let's talk about the game developers because, you know, when you guys develop games, and especially multiplayer games, we see companies like Riot Games, right? One of the big behemoths today. It used to be an indie company. In esports today, right? You've seen Valve and all the tournament organizers that using Dota 2 or Counter-Strike doing these major tournaments. The Esports World Cup in Paris right now that is happening, and other tournaments, the ISF World Championship. So in all of these tournaments, like big tournaments, you see the players playing and you see sometimes some clubs or national teams or whatever it may be participating in an event. And it's very unclear what the game developer gets from all of this, because in the end you gave those so-called communities, and in this case proper commercial entities, you gave them your IP, your intellectual property rights to use your game to create a league, or sometimes you spend all of this money to create your own league. Where's the return on investment?
Well, the return on investment, and this is why I believe that gaming, esports, like gaming as a casual person, esports when you're like trying to be really good and competitive, and federations and other organizations are working together 360 to drive the entire ecosystem, because game developers and publishers, they want and they need, of course, players. They need a constant influx of new players. However, even I can see that from a corporate perspective, their main job is to create the game and keep it working and make a good game. And then it comes up to becomes the responsibility of federations and other organizations to bring these games into schools, into youth clubs, and esports in general, and bring it into the communities. This is something we have done in Norway or in the Nordics for many years now. I mentioned it yesterday and today to some people. In Norway, if you're a Norwegian game developer, if it's Funcom or some other like smaller indie game developer company, every game that is produced will go into the national library, even into the national, like the libraries of schools, like the school libraries. We're talking elementary school level all the way up to, And so every kid, every youth has the opportunity to go and rent this game at their school library. And this is a great way to sort of implement video games in a more natural way instead of like forced marketing. And it's also a good way for like the Norwegian government to support their Norwegian game developers.
So what you're basically saying is that when I am a game developer and I invest in my multiplayer game in creating a competitive community around the game, even though I'm giving up some of the control of the, let's say, competitive scene, and I support it behind the scenes, I get in return the investment of all of these different groups, other commercial entities that use my game as a platform, the government, sports clubs, whatever it may be, and the game stops being just one game that is the same as any other game, but it becomes a platform like sport is.
Yeah, not just even a platform, but it becomes a cultural phenomenon. So that's what I've been trying to explain, and I know you and the others in the international board, the guys are like rolling your eyes every time I say like the Nordics, this is how we do in the Nordics. But it also ensured that we use a lot of video games when it comes to education. We use a lot of video games when it comes to health benefits. I actually want to talk with the booth up there, the stand.
Before we go, one final thing, because, and this is a key thing. A lot of people come and tell me, I say here in Israel, we have all of these really talented game developers, and I say, why not create, the next esports? Why not create the next competitive game that will take over? And they say, well, you have Counter-Strike. It's been going on for 30 years. You have Dota, you have League of Legends, you have all of these games. They are the giants. How can we even think about competing against them? Does an Israeli game developer has the opportunity to succeed and create the next esport? Is that something that you think is possible in this day?
Definitely. Like, definitely. And those games you mentioned, like, especially like League of Legends, which is probably one of the biggest right now, you have to remember it started as a mod. It was the community that created it. It came from Dota 2. It was a mod in Warcraft. So I don't see why any of you guys can't create like the next big thing, but you have to think outside of the box, and you have to work with the community and listen. And for the future, I think it goes back to the same again. Don't necessarily think about what you want to play. What does Gen Alpha want to play?
So we are talking about basically a give and take, right? We give some of the even decision-making power to the community, and in exchange, we get to become the town hall, where everybody comes together, compete.
Yeah, you will be like the most popular kid in the playground.
The bread and circuses of the modern time. Okay, if there was one thing that we've learned today, it's that building an esport isn't just about drawing a tournament with a big prize pool, right? It's about building a symbiotic ecosystem between a community and the game developer. It requires intentional design for watchability. We've discussed this. People don't just need to enjoy the game, they need to be able to watch it even if they are not playing right now. A deep understanding of player psychology, so there is also a lot of data involved in this. Aggressive churn management, and an economic model that sustains players, creators, and organizations, which together, it's a community. It's a community around the game. And when you get all of that right, you don't just get a spike in acquisition, you get infinite engagement. So, Elin, I'd like to personally thank you again for coming to Israel and joining us in this panel.
Thank you.
We didn't have a lot of time to discuss, and obviously esports is such a big thing, right? And we have federations, game developers, you know, we touched only the very basics here, but in the end, if even one person here creates the next big multiplayer esport game, then it has been worth it. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Elin.
Thank you so much.